She puked on the CEO during the interview, but what she whispered made him fall madly in love. "You've ruined my suit," the CEO said in calm, cold, and staring straight at her. Lydia was still on her knees, yogurt on her hands, shame in her throat. But instead of crying, she looked up and whispered something that made even him stop breathing. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. There were 12 people in the glass boardroom, and all of them had stopped breathing. The CEO's voice cut through the silence like a blade, low and sharp. "You've ruined my suit." He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He simply stared down at the front of his immaculate navy jacket, now splattered with what looked suspiciously like peach yogurt and nerves. The sour-sweet smell hung in the air like a second embarrassment. And at his feet, still kneeling, her hands trembling as she tried to mop it up with a stack of tissues, was Lydia Kane, 27, underqualified, and now undeniably unforgettable. Her face burned. Her stomach turned again, but thankfully, it was empty now. She'd puked. On the CEO, in front of the entire senior marketing team. She should have run. She should have disappeared through the floor. But instead, she whispered the first thing that came to her mind, soft, cracked, and absurd. "I'm so sorry. I skipped breakfast so I wouldn't throw up today." There was a beat, then another, and then something shifted. Evan Cross, the powerful, untouchable CEO, blinked. And against all odds, he crouched. He didn't touch her. He didn't smile. But something in his steel-gray eyes softened just a fraction, as if her words had cracked through 10 years of polished detachment. "Stand up," he said quietly. "You're shaking." She stood on unsteady heels, her legs wobbling like wet noodles. Someone slid a chair toward her. A woman with a cropped bob handed her a glass of water without a word. Lydia stared at it like it was an alien artifact. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. 10 minutes ago, she'd been nervously checking her reflection in the elevator mirror, clutching her portfolio and whispering, "You've got this!" Now she was the girl who vomited on a billionaire. She wiped her lips, not daring to meet anyone's gaze. Then, like a miracle she didn't deserve, Evan turned to the group and said, "Let's take a 10-minute break." No one argued. No one laughed. No. Everyone filed out quietly, as if something sacred had just been disturbed. When they were gone, Lydia felt the heat of humiliation rush to her ears. She looked down at the locket around her neck. Small, round, gold. A gift from her grandmother. Her interview charm. Well, that hadn't worked. "I can leave," she whispered. Obviously, I should go, but Evan shook his head. "I'd rather you stayed," he said, "if you're up for it." She looked up, confused. "What?" "I heard what you said." He loosened his tie slightly, just an inch, but for a man like Evan Cross, it was like watching a statue exhale. "You skipped breakfast so you wouldn't throw up." "That's ironic," Lydia winced. "I know. I was trying not to be a walking disaster today." His eyes met hers, calm, unreadable, and yet here you are. "I'm so sorry," she said again. "I'm not usually... I get nervous, but I don't explode." A pause. Then, to her utter confusion, the corner of his mouth tugged. Not a smile, but close. "You exploded with style," he murmured. Her laugh came out in a sputter. "Oh, please don't be nice. That's even worse." His voice dropped. "I'm not being nice. I'm being intrigued." She blinked. "By what?" "You." He said it like a fact, not a compliment, as if she'd spilled some secret on the table, along with the yogurt. Lydia didn't know what to say. She looked at her skirt, stained, wrinkled, and then at him, still crouched near her, as though he hadn't just had his morning derailed by a complete stranger with shaky hands and bad timing. Then he did something truly unthinkable. He stood, stepped to the side table, and poured 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with a splash of cream. He handed her the second, and for a moment their fingers brushed. The shock of it, the simple kindness, hit her harder than the nausea. "Thank you," she whispered. "Sit down," he said gently. "Let's try this again." They sat. And for 10 surreal, unplanned minutes, Lydia Kane found herself sitting across from the most powerful man she'd ever met, sipping coffee in a boardroom that still smelled faintly of nerves and yogurt. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't feel judged. Not entirely. They didn't talk about marketing. They didn't talk about her resume. Instead, he asked, "Why do you want this job?" Not the question, the way he said it. And somehow, maybe because there was nothing left to lose, she told the truth. "I need a fresh start," she said. "I've been stuck. My mom passed 2 years ago, and I was taking care of her. I lost a lot of time, not that I regret it, but now I feel like I'm 27 going on 17, trying to catch up." Evan didn't interrupt. She added more quietly, "And I know I'm not the most impressive candidate, but I work hard, I care, and I learn fast." A long silence. Then Evan leaned back, studying her, not like a boss assessing a disaster, but like a man trying to solve a riddle he'd never seen before. And just as Lydia began to shrink under the weight of his gaze, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen, a frown. "I have to take this," he said. Then, pausing at the door, he turned back. "Don't leave yet." Lydia nodded, heart thudding. He left. And, alone in the boardroom, Lydia finally exhaled, shaking, sipping coffee, fingers tight around her locket. The door cracked open again. A woman peeked in. "He never gives second chances," she said, eyebrows raised. "What did you say to him?" Lydia blinked. "I told him I skipped breakfast." The woman laughed softly, then winked. "Well, whatever it was, you've got 5 minutes to make it count." She disappeared before Lydia could respond. And Lydia sat there, legs still trembling, clutching the warm cup between her palms, wondering if this strange, humiliating morning might somehow turn into something bigger than just a second chance, because somewhere beyond that door, something was shifting. Someone else was waiting, and not everyone liked to lose. The second Lydia heard the heels click down the hallway, something inside her tightened. They weren't just footsteps. They were announcements. Confident, sharp, and deliberate. The sound of someone who didn't stumble, didn't shake, and definitely didn't throw up on executives. The glass door opened, and in walked a woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a Forbes feature titled Power. Precision, perfection. She had sleek black hair pulled into a flawless bun, high cheekbones, and a red silk blouse tucked neatly into tailored slacks that probably cost more than Lydia's rent. Her heels were impossibly high, and somehow she glided instead of walking. Her eyes landed on Lydia with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh," she said, voice bright, "you must be the other candidate." Lydia stood instinctively, then regretted it. Her cream skirt still had that awful blotch on the side, and her blouse had wrinkled where she'd been gripping it nervously. Yes," she managed, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I think so." "I'm Simone." "Simone Vale," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. Her grip was firm, too firm. "We met last year briefly, at the summit in Chicago. Or, well, maybe not." Lydia blinked. "No, I wasn't there." Simone's smile twitched. "Ah, of course not." And just like that, the tone was set. Simone walked around the room as if she owned it, pausing by the side table, sniffing the coffee Lydia had just finished, and setting it aside with 2 fingers like it might contaminate the air. "You've been waiting here alone?" she asked, eyes scanning the space. "Brave or patient?" Before Lydia could respond, Simone leaned slightly closer. "Evan doesn't usually run late," she said, as if letting Lydia in on a secret. "He hates wasting time." Lydia looked down at her locket, her fingers instinctively brushing the smooth, warm gold. She could feel herself retreating, shrinking into the kind of girl who says, "Thank you" too quickly, and never asks for more than she's offered, but not this time. "He had to take a call," Lydia said calmly. "We were mid-conversation." Simone blinked once. The smile faltered. "Oh," she said lightly. "So you've already spoken?" Lydia nodded, sitting back down. "Yes, briefly." Simone tilted her head, clearly recalculating something. Before she could respond, the door opened again. Evan stepped in, calm, focused, expression unreadable, but for one flicker, one half-second glance at Lydia, not at her stain, not at her awkward posture, at her. His eyes landed on the gold locket, just visible where it peaked above the neckline of her blouse, then flicked back up. "Simone," he said with a polite nod, "thank you for coming." "Of course," she said smoothly, offering him her hand. "It's always a pleasure." He didn't shake it. Instead, he turned toward the room. "Let's talk in the conference nook. Both of you." "Both?" Lydia's heart thudded. She stood, smoothing her skirt again, and followed them into a smaller seating area off to the side, less formal, more conversational. A low coffee table, soft lighting, 3 chairs. As they sat, Simone crossed one leg over the other and placed her hands on her knee, poised, controlled. Lydia settled more cautiously, her fingers still wrapped around the thin chain of her locket. "I want to try something different," Evan said, looking between them. "This position requires adaptability, so I want to see how the two of you adapt together." Simone blinked. "You mean a joint interview?" "Something like that," Evan said. "We'll call it an improvisation challenge." Lydia's stomach dipped. Simone's smile stretched. "Sounds fun." Evan slid a folder onto the table. "In here," he said, "are 3 fake campaign briefs. You'll each choose one, collaborate on a pitch for 10 minutes, then present it together." Lydia could barely breathe. 10 minutes?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Yes," Evan said. "Time starts now." Simone leaned forward, plucked the folder off the table, and opened it with crisp efficiency. "Well," she said, scanning the options, "I suppose we can eliminate the coffee brand. Too predictable. And the diaper startup? Not a chance. Let's do the eco-travel app." She looked at Lydia, waiting for agreement like it was automatic. But something in Lydia stirred, a flicker of boldness. "I think the coffee brand has the most emotional potential," she said gently. "It's the only one with a real storytelling angle. People connect over coffee, first dates, breakups, mornings with your grandmother." Simone hesitated. Just a beat too long. Evan watched them both. Lydia took a breath. "I vote coffee," she said softly but clearly. There was a silence. Then, with the faintest shrug, Simone relented. "All right then, coffee it is." For 10 chaotic, nerve-wracking minutes, the two women brainstormed, or at least Lydia brainstormed. Simone critiqued. "No, that sounds cliché. People don't say comfort blend anymore. Maybe let me handle the closing message." And yet, somehow, it began to come together. Lydia imagined a campaign around warmth and memory. She described the scent of her mom's kitchen, how the sound of the percolator used to mean safety, how a simple cup could mean connection. She forgot for a few seconds that she was competing. She just spoke. Even Simone went quiet. When time was up, Evan stood. "All right," he said. "Let's hear it." They presented. Clumsily at first, but then more fluidly, Lydia's gentle tone balancing Simone's polished delivery. And for one brief moment, it worked. Evan nodded, then walked to the window. The two women waited. Then he turned back and said, "I'll let you know by tomorrow." That was it. Lydia's heart dropped, not from rejection, but the uncertainty of it all. She rose to gather her bag. "Lydia?" Evan said. Just as she turned, she looked back. He nodded toward the empty coffee cup beside her chair. "Take another one for the road. You've earned it." She smiled. "I think I've had enough coffee for a lifetime." He smiled too, barely, and Lydia felt it like a jolt of electricity she didn't ask for. As she stepped into the hallway, her phone buzzed, a message from her landlord. Final notice, rent overdue. She closed her eyes, and just as she opened them again, she heard Simone's voice behind her in the corridor, speaking softly, but not softly enough. "I'm not losing to her. He's not that sentimental." Lydia didn't turn, but her fingers curled tightly around the locket at her neck. Because maybe he was, and maybe she wasn't here to lose. Lydia stood on the curb, trying not to cry in front of a bus stop that said, "Embrace your power." It featured a woman in a red pantsuit with perfect hair and teeth, probably someone like Simone. She tugged her cardigan tighter around her blouse, trying to hide the dried stain that still lingered beneath the surface. She'd dabbed it with cold water in the building's restroom, but some things just wouldn't come out. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't her landlord. From unknown number. Dinner? Her breath hitched. Before she could respond, another message arrived. From Evan Cross. "You left your resume folder. I thought you might want it back. Or we could just call it an excuse." A third bubble popped up. From Evan Cross. "I know a place. It's quiet. Good bread. Let me know. No pressure." No pressure? She almost laughed out loud. But instead of spiraling, she did something strange, something unfamiliar. She said yes. The place wasn't what she expected. No white tablecloths, no valet, no bow ties. Just a quiet cafe on a side street that smelled like rosemary and fresh yeast. The sign read, "Lenny's Bread and Soul." When she walked in, she found Evan already seated at a corner table. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled just slightly, and for once, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who remembered what coffee used to taste like before boardrooms. He stood as she approached. "You came," he said. "I thought you were joking," she replied, sliding into the booth. "I never joke about bread," he said, deadpan. She laughed too loudly, then covered her mouth with both hands. "Sorry, I'm still rattled." "You've had quite a day." Lydia looked down at her hands. "I've had quite a year." There was a pause. Then Evan handed her a menu. "Pick whatever looks comforting." She looked it over. Everything had strange, heartwarming names. First Warmth, Broken Crust, Mended Heart, and 2-Day Tomato Soup. "I feel like I'm ordering emotions," she murmured. Evan arched a brow. "That's why I like this place." She looked up, half smiling. "Let me guess. You come here when your suits survive meetings?" "No," he said. "I come here when they don't." That made her pause. A waitress appeared, older, cheerful, apron dusted with flour. "You two look like you need comfort carbs." "Exactly," Lydia said. "I'll have whatever comes with soup and forgiveness." "Excellent choice," the waitress winked. As she left, Evan leaned back. "So, tell me the truth. Why did you freeze when Simone walked in?" Lydia's smile faded. "Because she was everything I'm not, and she knew it." "And what exactly do you think she is?" "Polished, confident, strategic, connected." "And what are you?" Lydia hesitated, still figuring that out. He nodded once. Slowly, like that answer satisfied him more than any rehearsed pitch could have. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out her folder, neatly stacked, unwrinkled, with a sticky note on the front that said, "You left this, but you didn't leave empty." She took it gently, touched by the quiet message. "I have to ask," she said, "why are you being nice to me?" Evan tilted his head. "Do you think this is me being nice?" Lydia blinked. "Isn't it?" He looked down at his bread, broke it carefully, then glanced up. "No, this is me being honest." A long silence. Their food arrived, a bowl of tomato soup with 2 thick slices of rosemary sourdough, and a side of something that looked like roasted hope. They ate in silence for a while. Lydia dipped her bread, watching the steam curl from the bowl. Across from her, Evan seemed relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before, like the suit came off more than just physically. "You really run a billion-dollar company?" she asked softly. "I do." "And you still go places like this?" He looked around. "This place reminds me of before, when I still wanted to build something that mattered." Lydia nodded. "And now?" "Now I'm surrounded by people who want to be seen with me, not hear me." She swallowed. "Then why me?" He looked at her, really looked at her. And for a second, the air in the room thickened. "Because you weren't trying to impress me, you were just trying to survive the day." She blushed, looked down at her locket, fingers instinctively curling around it. "My grandmother used to say, even when you fall, fall with grace. Someone might be watching the way you get up." Evan's gaze dropped to the locket. "She sounds wise." She was. She used to say I was born with too much heart and not enough shield. He smiled. "That explains a lot." Lydia leaned back, soup half finished. "This is the strangest interview I've ever had." "It's not an interview." She froze. "It's not?" "No." Evan's voice was calm. "Simone's already hired." Her heart sank, hard and fast. "Oh," she whispered, trying not to let it show. "But," he added, "it's not the role you applied for." Lydia stared at him. He leaned in slightly. "I created something, today, after that boardroom moment, after you." And just like that, her stomach did the flip again. Not nausea, not fear, hope. And then the door opened. Simone, standing there, looking directly at them. It wasn't hard to find him. Routine makes men like Evan predictable, and someone had told her. She didn't say a word, but her expression said everything. Simone didn't make a scene, of course she didn't. She simply stood at the cafe doorway in that silk blouse and perfect posture. A woman who'd never had to raise her voice to get what she wanted. Her eyes moved from Evan to Lydia and then back again like she was reading a headline no one else had printed yet. "Evening," she said coolly. Evan stood. Not defensive, but steady. "Simone." She looked at Lydia and smiled, a polite, venomless curve that still managed to draw blood. "I hope I'm not interrupting." She already had. Lydia shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of her frizzing hair and soup-stained sleeve. The warm bread that had once felt like comfort now sat like a brick in her stomach. Simone looked at Evan, voice sweet and sharp. "Your assistant said you had a working dinner." "It is," Evan replied without flinching. "Just not with you." A beat. Simone's eyes flicked back to Lydia, then to the table, where Lydia's open folder still sat, the sticky note visible. Her gaze lingered there. Then, with a faint breath through her nose, she nodded. "Well, I'll leave you to it." She turned and walked away without another word. But the silence she left behind? That was louder than anything. Lydia didn't speak for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, "Are you trying to ruin your reputation?" "Or mine?" Evan looked at her, calm. "Neither. Because I just watched a woman silently accuse me of sleeping my way into a job I haven't even been offered." "You haven't done anything wrong," he said. "Evan," she said, voice quiet but firm, "you don't know me well enough to protect me." That gave him pause. She pulled her cardigan tighter, suddenly needing distance. "I've worked for men who were charming," she continued, "kind, generous, until someone prettier walked in or until things didn't go their way." "I'm not," he started. "I don't care who you are," she said gently. I care what you do with it." He was quiet. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I hear you." Those 3 words, spoken with zero defense, zero ego, surprised her more than anything else that night. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just listened. And in that stillness, something softened again. They walked outside together 10 minutes later. The sky had turned dark, the streets quiet. A soft breeze played with Lydia's loose hair, tugging strands gently across her cheeks. "I meant what I said," Evan said as they reached the corner, "about creating a position. Lydia glanced at him. What kind of position? I've been looking for someone to develop internal communications. Storytelling, culture pieces, ground-level brand identity. He paused. You speak like someone who knows what real people feel. That's rare. She tilted her head. Is this still about the yogurt incident? He laughed softly, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. Partly, that was unforgettable. Lydia grinned despite herself. It's nice to be known for something besides Excel formulas. He looked at her, not with charm, not with intent, but with sincerity. You're not ordinary, he said simply. That's why I reached out. Her smile faded slightly. And what about Simone? She asked. She saw us. She's good at what she does, but she's not who I'm building around anymore. Lydia stared at him. That sounds expensive, he chuckled. It might be. Then quietly, Can I walk you to the station? She hesitated, then nodded. They walked in comfortable silence, side by side. Lydia's bag strap pressed into her shoulder. Her locket tapped softly against her collarbone with each step, like a reminder. Don't shrink. You've already survived worse. At the platform entrance, she stopped. This is me, she said. Evan nodded. Neither moved. I don't expect you to trust me yet, he said finally. I don't, she replied, then softened. But I appreciate that you don't seem to expect me to either. He smiled, faint but honest. She stepped back half a step, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped paper bag, one of the cafe's leftover pastries. Here, she said, pressing it into his hand. You never got dessert. He looked down at it, then back at her. Is this part of your interview strategy? She smiled. No, that ended the moment I threw up on you. He laughed again. Low, genuine, almost like a secret only she was allowed to hear. Then she turned and walked through the turnstile. Evan stood there for a long moment, watching the train pull in, watching her disappear into the crowd. The next morning, Lydia woke to an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject, provisional offer. Story, architect, Cross & Co. Message, you start Monday? If you say yes, salary attached. So is freedom. P.S. We're stocking the break room with peach yogurt for poetic symmetry. E.C. She laughed. Actually laughed out loud, alone in her tiny kitchen with yesterday's cardigan still draped over the chair. Then her eyes landed on her phone screen. One new notification from an account she didn't follow. It was a photo of her in the cafe with Evan, posted anonymously, captioned, From vomit to velvet, someone knows how to play the game. Lydia's hand froze over the screen. Because the account. It only followed one person, Simone Vale. She laughed, actually laughed, out loud, alone in her tiny kitchen with yesterday's cardigan still draped over the chair. Then her eyes landed on her phone screen. One new notification from an account she didn't follow. It was a photo of her in the cafe with Evan, posted anonymously. Captioned, From vomit to velvet, someone knows how to play the game. Lydia's hand froze over the screen. Because the account. It only followed one person. Simone Vale. She hadn't even accepted the offer yet. And already she was being treated like someone who hadn't earned it. She wasn't going to start. She was going to face the leak before saying yes. By 9:14 a.m., the photo had already made its way into 2 Slack channels, a WhatsApp group for industry gossip, and an anonymous marketing blog called Pitchforked, known for exposing affairs, firings, and secret rivalries behind polished press releases. The headline read, CEO gets cozy with candidate, new hire or new flame. And below it, the grainy photo of Lydia and Evan seated side by side in the cafe, coffee cups close, his eyes, unmistakably, fixed on her like she was saying something worth remembering. Lydia stared at it from her phone in bed, heart hammering so loudly she could barely hear herself think. An hour later, Lydia walked into the Cross & Core building with her head up and her stomach in knots. The receptionist gave her a too curious glance. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, and when she stepped out on the 14th floor, a man in a charcoal suit leaned toward a coworker and whispered just loud enough, "Guess all it takes is one dinner." Lydia didn't react, but her hands were balled into fists inside her coat pockets. She headed straight for the one place she wasn't sure she belonged yet, Evan's office, his assistant. Kara stood to greet her. She looked polished, poised, and unreadable. "He's on a call," she said, voice professional, "but he's expecting you." Lydia nodded, stepping toward the glass wall. Through it, she could see him, standing by the window, phone to his ear, expression unreadable. But when his eyes met hers, even through glass, he paused, and just for a second she saw it. Concern. He ended the call quickly and waved her in. Inside she didn't sit. She stood across from his desk, chin high. "So," she said, "do I still have the job?" Evan didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And if I hadn't had dinner with you?" His jaw tightened slightly. "You'd still have the job." Lydia nodded once, then opened her bag, pulled out the printed article, and laid it on his desk. "I don't need protecting," she said, "but I won't be part of a narrative I didn't write." "I agree. I'm not ashamed of dinner or of being seen with you, but if I'm walking into this company as a punchline, I need to know, is your loyalty to your image or to the truth?" Evan's eyes softened. Then, slowly, he stood. "I didn't plan any of this, Lydia," he said, "but I also didn't shut the door when it happened, and that's on me." He walked around the desk, stood in front of her, not close enough to overwhelm, but not distant either. "This is my company, and if people are going to whisper, they should at least whisper the right things." She blinked. "Like what?" "That I hired someone who told the truth when it was easier to apologize, that I gave someone a shot because of talent, not timing, and that if they want to question your integrity, they'll have to go through mine." Lydia swallowed hard. She hadn't expected him to fight for her dignity, not like this. Then he added, quieter, "If you'd rather walk away now, I'll respect it, but I hope you won't." She looked at the locket against her chest. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice again. Grace's quiet strength. Dignity doesn't yell back. It shows up. She looked him in the eyes. "I'm staying," she said, "but not because of you." A pause. "I'm staying because I won't let someone else write my story." Evan nodded once. "Fair enough." Later that morning, Lydia took her first real tour of the office. Kara walked her through the creative and culture departments, introducing her gently as our new hire, here to tell stories worth telling. Most people smiled, a few whispered. One woman, in legal, gave her a hug and said, "Don't let them dull your shine." At noon, Lydia slipped into the break room. It was oddly quiet. A few heads lifted, and there, on the second shelf of the fridge, she saw it. A stack of single-serve peach yogurts. She laughed just once, and someone across the room smiled. She grabbed one and sat down with it, popping the lid off. As she stirred it slowly, her thoughts ran wild. What if she failed? What if this job ended as messily as it started? But then again, maybe it already had, and she was still here. That evening, she got an unexpected message from Simone Vale. Subject, "Clarity, you're brave. But don't confuse sentiment with strategy. This world doesn't reward softness. It eats it." Lydia read it twice, then calmly deleted it. No response, because the best way to deal with people like Simone, don't give them a stage. Back in her apartment, Lydia lit the tiny candle by her kitchen window, her ritual when she needed to feel steady. She placed the locket beside it. Her grandmother used to tell her it carried every good thing you've survived. She watched the flame flicker, phone buzzing nearby. Another text from Evan. "Tomorrow. Staff Town Hall. I'll be addressing the leak. No one questions what you've earned. Not if I have a voice in the room. You okay?" Lydia looked at the candle, the flame dancing gently in the dark. Then she replied, "I will be." But what she didn't type, what she only whispered to herself, was this: if I can survive shame, I can survive success. The staff town hall was held in the glass atrium, bright, echoing, and filled with tension so thick you could slice it with one of the marketing intern's name tags. Everyone was there, from the executive suite to the interns, from legal to product design. Some stood sipping coffee, others sat cross-legged on the floor, most whispered. And all of them glanced at least once in Lydia's direction. She stood near the back, not hiding, just watching, breathing, holding her coffee cup like a shield. Her locket rested just above her heart, warm from her skin. "You don't have to shrink," she reminded herself. "Just stand." Kara stepped up to the mic to open the meeting, smiling tightly. "As many of you know, this week brought a unique situation to our team." She cleared her throat. "But our CEO has a few words before we dive into updates." Evan crossed the room calmly. No rush, no fear. Dressed sharp, simple, and commanding, but today there was no tie, just a white shirt, sleeves rolled, and a presence that didn't demand attention. It earned it. He took the mic, and the room fell still. "I won't waste your time," he began. "There's been a photo, a caption, some speculation, a lot of noise, but not enough truth." He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. "The woman in that photo isn't a scandal. She's not a mistake. She's not gossip." His voice dropped just enough to hush even the whispers. "She's the reason I created a new position, a role our company needs. She challenged me, told the truth when she had no reason to trust me, and reminded me that stories aren't built on power. They're built on people." He turned slightly, and for a breathless moment his eyes found Lydia's. "We don't shame people for being real," he said. "We promote them for it." The room went silent. Someone in the back clapped. Then two more. Then it spread. Not a standing ovation, but a ripple of acknowledgement. And Lydia. She didn't cry, but she did breathe for the first time that day. After the meeting, the atrium began to clear. Groups scattered. People buzzed. The whispers didn't vanish, but they changed. She caught words like dignity, brave, bold move, and then she heard it again, the heels, clicking confidently. Simone. "Touching speech," she said, appearing at Lydia's side. "Very performative." Lydia didn't flinch. "You orchestrated this, or at least made sure it spread." Simone tilted her head. "That's quite an accusation." "No one else knew I was there," Lydia replied calmly, "and I checked. That account, the one that posted it, follows one person." Simone didn't deny it. She didn't even blink. "Be careful, Lydia," she said smoothly. "People with soft hearts rarely survive long here, especially when they confuse attention for affection." Lydia looked at her, then smiled softly. "Do you know what my grandmother used to say?" she asked. Simone rolled her eyes faintly. "Never mistake a spotlight for safety." Simone scoffed. "How quaint." "And do you know what else she said?" Lydia added. "Voice like silk. When someone tries to shame you in the dark, drag the truth into the light." She stepped past Simone without waiting for a reaction, heart pounding, but posture steady. Later that day, Lydia returned to her desk, a small but sunlit corner of the creative wing, with her name freshly printed on a placard and a bouquet of mismatched daisies sitting on her chair. No note, just flowers. She smiled. "Nice office," a voice said gently. She turned. It was James, mid-50s, head of HR. A kind-eyed man with silver hair and a sense of humor so dry it came with a drought warning. "I've seen a lot of people come through this floor," he said, hands in his pockets, "but not many who get slammed with a scandal before they get their email password." Lydia winced. "Yeah, not quite the welcome package I imagined." James chuckled. "You handled it well. I'll be honest, most people fold under that kind of pressure." She shrugged. "I've folded before. It's not the worst thing. The worst is staying folded. He nodded slowly. We should talk soon. About culture, team boundaries, and maybe how to put Simone in a place where she can't do this again. Lydia blinked. You believe me? He smiled. Honey, the whole company believes you. The people who matter, anyway. She exhaled, her fingers brushing the locket at her chest again. One of the interns passed her desk and whispered, That speech made me cry. Lydia smiled. Same. That night, she walked home instead of taking the train. The city buzzed around her in sirens, horns, people shouting, but inside her, quiet. And just before turning the corner to her street, her phone buzzed. A voice message. Evan. I didn't say everything I wanted to at the town hall. But I meant every word I did say. You're changing things here, quietly and fast. Let me know when you're ready for dinner again. No cameras, no photos, just bread. And honesty. She smiled, eyes glistening, but before she could hit reply, another alert. New internal email. Subject HR investigation opened. Anonymous report received contents. An internal review has been launched into workplace misconduct and digital harassment. Initial findings link the source of the leak to a senior staff member. Further action pending. Lydia read it twice and whispered aloud, I didn't have to fight dirty. The truth's doing it for me. The next day, Evan didn't show up. No calendar update, no automatic reply, no text. Lydia wasn't sure if that worried her more as a new hire or as the woman who had now been at the center of 3 gossip threads and 2 hallway stares since 9 a.m. He wasn't a man who disappeared without reason. By noon, rumors started swirling. A merger deal? Legal trouble? Maybe HR finally cracked down? She ignored it all. Instead, she focused on what she came to do. Write truth. The draft she'd been working on, a new company-wide piece for internal culture, was more than just bullet points and brand tone. It was personal. It asked real questions. What if transparency wasn't a campaign, but a practice? What if leadership stopped performing values and started living them? She was on her 3rd cup of tea when Kara appeared at her door. He's back, she said flatly, and he wants to see you. Lydia nodded, heart tight. She closed her laptop and smoothed her skirt. Her locket swung gently at her chest as she walked. Evan's office was dim, curtains drawn, lights off except for the desk lamp. His jacket was slung across a chair, tie loosened, collar open. He looked not defeated, but disarmed, like someone who'd been punched by the truth and hadn't decided whether to hit back or sit with it. You wanted to see me? Lydia asked gently. He looked up, eyes tired. Simone's lawyer called this morning. She stiffened. She's claiming hostile treatment, discrimination, emotional manipulation. He exhaled through his nose. And she's implying that I acted inappropriately with you, that your hiring was transactional. Lydia said nothing, not because she didn't have words, but because none of them could soften the ugliness of what that meant. She's trying to spin the narrative, Evan added. Make it look like You don't need to explain, Lydia interrupted softly but firmly. He paused. Surprised, she took a step forward. But I do need to say something, and I need you to listen without fixing it. Evan nodded slowly. Okay. Lydia crossed her arms, but not defensively, more like someone holding herself together. That dinner, the cafe, the notes, they were kind, honest, but they were also risky. Not because you did something wrong, but because people watch. And they make assumptions faster than they make space. He didn't flinch. I should have said no to dinner, she went on. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I hadn't found my footing yet, and I don't want to build a career on someone else's gaze. Not even yours. He stepped around the desk, slowly. Lydia, I'm not here to be rescued, she said, looking up. And you're not the villain in this story, but you could become the excuse people use to dismiss me. I won't let that happen. Silence. And then, to her surprise, he smiled, not his CEO smile, not his public charm, a tired, human smile. "I needed to hear that," he said quietly. Lydia exhaled, her body relaxing for the first time that day. "So did I." He glanced toward the window, then back. "You want to walk away?" She shook her head. "No. I want to walk forward, but this time, not in your shadow." He nodded once. "That's fair." Later that afternoon, at James's request, Lydia hosted her first small pilot culture circle under HR supervision. Just 6 employees. No slides, no corporate buzzwords, just a pot of herbal tea, a stack of blank sticky notes, and a whiteboard with one question: what's one thing we pretend is fine, but isn't? At first, the silence was thick. Then a junior designer said softly, "People are scared to say no, even when they're drowning." Someone from product said, "We don't get real feedback, just vague compliments and sudden firings." An HR rep murmured, "Most interns burn out before we ever learn their names." Lydia didn't offer solutions. She just listened, validated, wrote things down. HR logged the anonymous notes for follow-up, while Lydia provided context and communication support for the report. And when the session ended, one woman lingered, mid-40s, quiet eyes. "You're different," she said. "You don't flinch?" Lydia smiled gently. "I've already fallen on the worst day of my life, publicly. Everything after that is just walking upright." The woman chuckled and squeezed her shoulder. "Keep walking." Back at her desk, she found something resting against her monitor. A small brown envelope, no label, no handwriting. Inside, a gold enamel pin. A tiny heart. Almost a match for her locket. Attached was a typed note. "You don't have to be perfect to be powerful." Lydia stared at it for a long time, her fingers brushing her locket, the one her grandmother had given her when she said, "Every woman deserves one thing she wears not for looks, but for memory." She pinned the heart to her blazer, just below the locket. Power and memory together. That evening she walked home instead of taking the train. The wind was crisp, the streets busy, but inside, stillness. And then, her phone buzzed, a voice note. "Evan, long day, you were extraordinary. Let's skip the headlines and the noise. Just bread, just peace." "When you're ready." Lydia smiled, warmth spreading quietly through her chest. She didn't need to replay the message. She'd heard what mattered between the lines. "I'm not ready for dinner, but I could do a sandwich." With silence. "And mustard." His reply came instantly. "Mustard and dignity. Best combo I've heard all year." She was still smiling when her email pinged. Subject: Anonymous submission. Cultural abuse allegation. Her breath caught. She opened it. No sender, no signature. Just this: "There's more Simone's hiding. Check her travel reports. She's not just ambitious, she's ruthless. She covered up a serious HR violation last quarter." The victim left without a voice. "Now you have one." Lydia sat perfectly still. The city moved around her, horns, footsteps, wind. But in her tiny apartment, everything held its breath. And softly, not with anger, not with fear, she whispered, "This just stopped being personal." The email sat in her inbox like a stone. Lydia had read it 4 times, and each time the words struck harder. She covered up a serious HR violation last quarter. The victim left without a voice. Now you have one. There was no name, no timestamp, no detail beyond what mattered. Simone had hurt someone, not just with ambition, but with silence. And Lydia was no longer just the target of gossip. She was the only person who could make the truth loud. The next morning, Lydia requested a private meeting with HR, not an email, not a calendar invite, a knock on the door, face to face. James, the silver-haired HR director who had left the gold heart pin on her desk, looked up from his tea. "You look like someone who didn't sleep." "I didn't," she said. He nodded, gestured toward the chair. I need to talk about Simone Vale, Lydia said. Off the record, for now. James blinked. Okay. There's a whistleblower, she continued. Someone sent me an anonymous report. They claim Simone covered up a misconduct case last quarter that someone left this company hurt, silenced, and it never got reviewed. James leaned back, his face unreadable. Do you have the report? No, just the email. Any evidence? Not yet. Then we can't investigate it formally. Lydia felt the sting rise up her chest, not from James's tone, but from how gently he said it, like he already knew she would be disappointed. But, he added, I can pull her travel records, I can request incident logs, quietly. Lydia hesitated. If I push this, will it cost me my job? James studied her. The people who push for the right things usually scare the wrong people. But we don't fire people for speaking up, not on my watch. She didn't cry, but something in her shoulders loosened. And if the victim doesn't want to be found, she asked quietly, then you hold the space open anyway, he said. Sometimes it takes years for the right person to walk through the door you left open. That afternoon, Evan found her in the creative lounge, sitting alone with a cold cup of tea, typing slowly, deleting often. I heard you went to HR, he said gently. Lydia didn't look up. Do I need your permission for that? No. Then why mention it? Because I need to know if this is personal, he said, or professional. She closed her laptop, finally meeting his eyes. It was personal, at first, because of how she came after me, but now, she shook her head. It's not about me anymore. Someone was hurt. Someone left this place feeling invisible. That's not gossip, Evan. That's a wound. He stepped closer, voice lower. Then let me help. She stared at him, uncertain. Why? She asked. Because if I built something where that could happen, he said quietly, then I'm not the leader I thought I was, and I don't want to keep pretending. Lydia's throat tightened. She reached for the chain around her neck, fingers finding the locket, her anchor. My grandmother used to say, she murmured, if you tell the truth halfway, you still lie to yourself. He sat down across from her. I'm ready to tell the whole thing, he said. And in that moment, for the first time since everything started, Lydia didn't feel like she was fighting alone. The next morning, James forwarded her an encrypted file. It was Simone's travel reimbursement spreadsheet. At first glance, it was dull. Car services, flights, hotel receipts. But halfway down the page, Lydia spotted something strange. A 3-day retreat to a leadership summit that had no agenda attached. No notes, no internal report, no attendees listed. She cross-referenced it with an old Slack thread from a now-deleted employee, an intern who had abruptly left the company 3 days after the summit. The same intern who, in one of the HR culture sessions, someone had referred to in passing as the one who just disappeared. Lydia felt the chill spread in her chest. She was close, too close to stop now. That evening she stayed late. The office was quiet, just the low hum of HVAC and the flicker of screensavers across empty desks. Evan passed by, pausing when he saw her still working. You should go home, he said gently. She didn't look up. So should you. He stepped in, glanced at the wall of sticky notes she'd started building, anonymous quotes, collected truths from her culture circles. His eyes landed on one in the center. Silence isn't professionalism, it's fear. She said that, didn't she? He asked. Lydia nodded. Simone told me softness wouldn't survive here. Evan stepped closer. Softness isn't weakness, Lydia. It's what the world tries to beat out of us, but some people don't let it go. You didn't. She looked at him. Sometimes I feel like the locket is the only thing holding me together. What's in it? He asked softly. She hesitated, then unclasped it gently. Inside, a tiny piece of folded paper. He leaned closer. On it, in faded ink, you already are everything they say you aren't. Evan stared at it for a long time. "I never had anything like that," he said. "No one who spoke that kind of belief into me." "You do now," Lydia said, closing the locket again. Their eyes met. No kiss, no touch, just silence. And the weight of what wasn't said, but was understood. Just as she was packing up to leave, her inbox pinged. Subject line: "You're not the only one digging?" She froze. Another anonymous email. "You're on the right path. Simone's not working alone." Check the approval chain on her summit travel. Someone up high signed off. "Look close, Lydia. This goes deeper than you think." Lydia felt her hands shake, not from fear, from clarity, because when you start pulling threads of power, sometimes the whole thing unravels. She stared at the screen, then slowly whispered, "It's not just about exposing her anymore. It's about protecting whoever's next." The next morning, Lydia arrived to find the office humming, but differently. Not the usual Monday caffeine buzz. This was sharper, focused. Something was coming, and everyone could feel it. A few people glanced at her. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity, even respect. The whispering had changed. It was no longer about her shame. It was about her strength. She was becoming the woman who stood in rooms no one else dared to enter. At 10 a.m., James called her in. He didn't smile this time. "There's been an internal development," he said. "We opened a private review of Simone's conduct based on your tip and an unrelated secondary report." "Secondary?" Lydia asked. He nodded. "Another anonymous complaint. More detailed. It came in overnight." He slid a file toward her, thicker than the last. Lydia opened it. There, buried between travel logs and budget approvals, was the signature. Douglas Merritt, Senior VP of Finance, Simone's longtime mentor, and the executive who had first offered to fast-track her promotion. Lydia felt the nausea return, not from nerves, but clarity. "They buried it," she said. "Together," James nodded. "And now, we can't keep it buried. Legal is preparing for an emergency review. This will go to the board." Lydia leaned back in her chair, hand instinctively reaching for the locket at her neck. She ran her thumb along the warm gold shell, but this time she didn't open it. She didn't need to. Her strength wasn't in the paper inside. It was in what she'd become. "I want to speak," she said. James looked up. "At the board review?" She nodded. "I was there when the company failed someone. I should be there when we try to make it right." He exhaled, impressed. "You're braver than most VPs I've seen." "I'm not brave," Lydia said. "I'm just not willing to be silent anymore." That afternoon, she found Evan in the cafe down the street. Not Lenny's, but quieter, tucked between a flower shop and an antique bookstore. He looked up, surprised. "You found me," he said. "You weren't hiding very well." She slid into the seat across from him. There was no flirtation between them, no pretense. Just two people sitting in the storm they helped stir, trying to find shelter. "I know about Merritt," she said quietly. He nodded. "So do I. I confronted him this morning. He denied it. But legal isn't blind." "What happens now?" Evan stirred his coffee. "Simone's been asked to step back during the investigation." She didn't take it well. Lydia blinked. "She's still here?" "For now." Lydia looked down at her hands. "I want to speak," she repeated. He looked up. "To the board?" She nodded. Evan paused, considering her. Then he said, "You know, I spent years trying to make this company bulletproof. But I never stopped to ask what we were protecting ourselves from." Lydia met his gaze. "Sometimes what we're protecting is the rot." He gave her a slow smile. "Then let's cut it out." At 5 p.m., Lydia walked the halls with her notepad, collecting quotes for her next culture piece. She stopped by the intern desk, the same one where the anonymous victim had once sat. There was a new intern now, quiet. Bright-eyed, probably 19. She smiled nervously as Lydia approached. "Hey," Lydia said softly. "I know it's not easy being here, but if you ever feel unsafe or unheard, my door's open. And I mean that." The girl nodded, eyes welling up a little. "Thank you. People usually just tell us to toughen up." Lydia smiled. "I used to think soft people had to become hard to survive. Now I think we just need to stop pretending hard people are the only ones who belong." Back at her desk, the flowers were gone, replaced with a sealed envelope. Her name was handwritten on the front. Inside, a note on fine cream stationery. "You're not as forgettable as I hoped. S." There was no apology, no admission, just the faintest sting of defeat disguised as a compliment. She folded it in half, then into fourths, then she threw it away. It didn't deserve a place in her story. Later that night, as rain hit her apartment windows, Lydia sat curled on the couch reading through her remarks for the board review. She didn't want to be dramatic. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. The locket rested beside her on the cushion, open. The paper inside read, "You already are everything they say you aren't." She wasn't here to become someone new. She was here to remember who she already was. Her phone buzzed. Evan. Board meeting moved to Thursday. "You still sure?" "Yes," she replied. "Let them hear it from someone who's lived it." "I'll be there," he sent back. "Not to speak, just to stand beside you." Lydia smiled, but it wasn't a romantic smile. It was the kind you wear when someone shows you they mean what they said, without asking for anything in return. At 9:37 p.m., her email chimed again. Subject line, "Third report, final thread." Lydia opened it slowly. Another anonymous sender. "There's one more name you haven't looked at. He signed Simone's mentorship program. He silenced 2 other complaints, and he's sitting on the ethics committee. If you speak, speak loudly. They're counting on your fear. Break it." Lydia stared at the message. The rot went all the way to the top, and she had 2 days to decide. Would she pull it out in front of the entire board, or let someone else walk into the same fire? Her hands trembled, not from fear, from purpose, because some truths don't whisper. They demand a microphone. The boardroom was colder than it needed to be. Glass walls, leather chairs, coffee cups untouched, and 13 faces, some curious, some cautious, all staring at Lydia as she stood behind the long, polished table. Evan sat at the far end, silent, arms crossed, eyes steady. He hadn't come as CEO today. He'd come as a witness. James from HR sat beside him. Legal was present. So was Douglas Merritt, VP of Finance. Calm, buttoned up, silent. Simone was not there. Her seat remained empty. Lydia stood, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the voice that called the meeting to order. She wasn't here to rehearse. She was here to remember. So she opened the locket. Not for show, for strength. Then she looked up, chin high, voice calm, and spoke. "I'm not an executive. I wasn't trained to speak like one. But I know what silence feels like, and this company has gotten very good at being quiet when it should have spoken up." A flicker passed through the room. She continued. 3 months ago, an intern disappeared from this building. No goodbye party, no offboarding email, just gone, and now I know why. She wasn't heard, she wasn't helped, she was hidden. A board member shifted in his seat. Another cleared her throat. I was nearly silenced too, just differently. Through gossip, through shame, but I stayed, and I listened. And I started hearing the same stories behind closed doors, stories of retaliation, of cover-ups, of certain people being protected because they knew how to climb fast and quietly. Lydia looked straight at Merritt. And the man who signed those protections is in this room. Douglas Merritt's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. James placed a quiet folder on the table, Simone's travel approvals. Incident logs, expense signatures, evidence. This isn't just about Simone. It's about the system that made her possible, the one that taught her, and everyone under her, that ambition is more valuable than accountability. One board member interrupted, "Miss Kane, do you understand the risk you're taking by speaking this openly?" Lydia turned to him, not defensively, but with clarity. "Yes, I do. And I understand that every person who stays quiet to keep a job loses a part of themselves in the process. I won't lose mine." Silence, heavy, charged. Then, softly, a voice from the far corner, "I believe her." It was Marla Reyes, board member 62, the longest tenured leader in the company. I watched Simone's rise. It moved too fast, too smooth. I said nothing. "I regret that." More silence. Then another voice, "If we don't act, we're complicit." One by one, the room shifted, and Douglas Merritt still said nothing. But his face was pale. Lydia stepped back, her heart racing. She had said what needed to be said. Now it was in their hands. She walked out of the boardroom without waiting for applause. She didn't need it. Evan caught up with her just past the elevator bank. He didn't speak right away. He just stood beside her, matching her breath. "I've never been more proud of being wrong," he said quietly. She looked at him, confused. "I underestimated you. The day you walked in with yogurt on your blouse, I thought you were a storm that would pass." She smiled softly. "Turns out I was the weather system." He laughed, then gently, "What now?" Lydia shrugged. "Now, they decide, but whatever happens..." I spoke. "You did more than speak," he said. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her something small, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. Inside, "You already are everything they say you aren't." He had copied the words from her locket. "By hand." Her breath caught. "You listened," she whispered. "I always do," he replied, "especially to people who aren't trying to impress me." They stood there, no rush, no grand romantic gesture, just quiet respect, genuine closeness. Two people who had walked through fire and weren't afraid of what came next. That night, Lydia returned home exhausted but whole. She hung her coat, lit her candle, and set the locket on the counter. But before she could sit down, her phone buzzed. New email. Subject, board decision, immediate action required. She opened it. Simone Vale, terminated. Douglas Merritt, suspended pending investigation. Full ethics committee review. Effective immediately. Company-wide culture reset approved. And Lydia Kane, "We'd like to speak to you about a new leadership role." Her hand flew to her mouth. She sat down, slowly, carefully, and whispered, barely believing it, "This is what surviving with dignity looks like." 3 weeks later, the air inside the Cross & Co. offices felt different, not louder, not busier, just lighter. The usual tension, that corporate buzz that vibrated beneath the emails, meetings, and polite smiles, had shifted. Like someone had opened a window, and the silence that used to choke the hallways had finally blown out. Simone was gone? Quietly, no goodbye email, no press release. Douglas Merritt had resigned 2 days after the board vote, citing personal reasons no one believed. And the intern, the one whose story had been buried, had returned, not to stay, but to speak, to be seen, and for the first time, to be heard. Lydia didn't need credit, but she felt it in the air. The culture had changed, and she had helped change it. The offer came on a Thursday. No spotlight, no parade, just a quiet conversation over tea and shortbread in James's corner office. He slid a folder across the desk, gently. Director of Internal Culture and Ethics. It wasn't loud. It wasn't shiny, but it was right. "I'm not a fixer," Lydia said softly. "I don't want to pretend I have all the answers." James smiled over the rim of his mug. "We're not asking for a fixer. We're planting a lighthouse. You don't need to rescue anyone. Just keep the light on." She read her name at the top of the contract. Lydia Kane. in print, not in parentheses, not footnoted, front and center. She signed without hesitation, not with trembling fingers, but with the hand of someone who had walked through fire and come out clearer, not colder. Evan wasn't in the office that day, but at 4:12 p.m. a small box appeared on Lydia's desk. No name, no card, just a folded paper wrap tied with twine. Inside, a simple silver paperweight, shaped like a heart, etched underneath 5 words, "Not fragile, just full." She smiled. He wasn't asking for attention, he was offering respect. That weekend, Lydia visited her grandmother's grave for the first time in a year. The cemetery was quiet. The wind was warm. She sat cross-legged in the grass, locket in hand, the city far behind her. "I said the words," she whispered. "I didn't just survive this time. I stayed. I stood. I let them see who I am." She opened the locket. Inside was the same note, faded, familiar. "You already are everything they say you aren't." She added her own, folded tight, placed beside it. "I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become after." And for the first time, she didn't wear the locket home. She didn't need to, not anymore. Monday came with calm steps. Lydia arrived early. Sunlight washed over her new desk in the corner, not a symbol of power, but of peace. She placed 3 things on it: a photo of her mother, smiling with wind in her hair, the locket resting in a glass dish, and the silver heart-shaped paperweight. From Evan she stood there a moment, breathing it in. Not the success, the stillness. Then a quiet knock on the doorframe. Evan stood there, soft shirt, hands in pockets, warm eyes. "May I?" he asked. She smiled. "You already are." He stepped in, taking in the space. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied. "We did." He nodded slowly. "What now?" "Now I build," she said. "Without needing to prove I deserve the bricks." He smiled, not wide, but true. Then, gently, "I'd like to see you outside these walls, not as your CEO, not even as your co-survivor, just as a man who's been waiting to love you at the right time." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened a drawer, pulled out a brown paper bag, and handed it to him. He opened it. A sandwich. Mustard. Extra. He looked up. She grinned. "One condition." "Name it." "No games, no headlines, no need to be anything but real." He nodded. "Just bread. And the life we build from here." She reached out her hand. He took it. Not in ceremony, in agreement, in love. 1 year later, the ethics platform Lydia built had become the company's quiet compass. The culture had changed, not just through policies and training slides, but through people, through how they spoke, how they listened, how they showed up for one another. And it started with one voice, her voice. The official launch came with a video, simple, heartfelt, no flash. Just Lydia, sitting at her desk, speaking straight to the screen with the steady warmth of someone who had lived every word. We don't tell people who they are. We give them space to show us. And we don't build companies on silence. We build them on story, one voice at a time. A year later, after a quiet ceremony surrounded only by close friends, the video ended on a still frame, gentle and full of meaning, a locket, a silver heart-shaped paperweight, and 2 wedding rings, side by side. Resting on a folded note, the screen faded to her name, not in bold, just in full. Lydia Kane, director, culture and ethics wife, leader, storyteller, human. She didn't rise from nothing. She rose from everything, from grief, from shame, from whispered judgment, from mustard sandwiches and quiet strength. From the memory of a woman who taught her that dignity doesn't shout. It stands still and speaks last. And from a single sentence that carried her farther than fear ever could, "You already are everything they say you aren't." The end. Now I turn to you. What would you have done in Lydia's place? Would you have walked away, or would you have spoken, even with a trembling voice? Let me know in the comments, and if Lydia's story touched you, if even just a little, please like, share, and subscribe. More stories are coming, stories of quiet courage, of second chances, and love that chooses dignity over drama. Rate this one from 0 to 10 below. And until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and never shrink where you were meant to shine.